Selene W reporting for Kids First, and today I'm speaking with the award-winning writer, teacher, and journalist, and gardener, Michael Pollan, about his new documentary, Food Inc. 2, which releases in select theaters on April 9th.
Hi, Selene.
Hi. Mr. Pollan has written 9 books and published numerous articles about the socio-cultural impact of food. He has received numerous awards, including the James Beard Foundation Leadership Award, is a professor at UC Berkeley, and in 2010 was chosen as Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Today, we're going to talk about his new documentary, Food Inc. 2. Welcome to Kids First, Mr. Pollan.
Thank you. Thank you, Selene.
We're so lucky to have you here.
It's a privilege to be here.
Right. So, I was born in 2008 when Food Inc. was made. So, I represent a new generation of viewers and food consumers. Why is it timely to release the sequel to the original film?
Well, we weren't planning to make a sequel, and we'd been asked to several times because the first one was quite successful, but we didn't think the story had changed that much until the pandemic. And in the spring of 2020, when the whole country closed down, the food system fell apart, basically. Suddenly you had this split screen on your television of empty store shelves in the supermarket. At the same time, farmers were destroying crops, euthanizing cattle and pigs. And what was going on? How could that happen? How could you have that split? And it turns out it was because our food system, the companies that essentially run it, are so big and so specialized that even though it's a very efficient system in the best of times, it can't deal with shocks like a pandemic. So when everybody stopped going to school, stopped going to work, the part of the food chain that supplied schools and factories and offices and restaurants completely stopped. Yet the way that food chain worked, eggs sold in 128, egg cartons, and toilet paper sold on giant, rolls. They couldn't pivot and start supplying supermarkets. And so we saw the weakness of the food system and the vulnerability of having a food system where very few companies call the shots. We saw this with the infant formula crisis too a couple of years ago, when suddenly there was a contamination problem at one of the 2 companies that supplies most of the baby formula, and suddenly babies couldn't get fed. So that was our signal that it was worth taking another look at the food system. The other thing that had happened too is the rise of what is called ultra-processed food. These are very complex foods with 20 or 30 ingredients that are really becoming 70% of the diet for many people, which is and they're very unhealthy. So anyway, that was why we thought it's time to take another look and see what's happened in the years since 2008.
Wow, so much has happened. I'm so thankful that a sequel was made. So, going back to your roots, how did your childhood experience with gardening impact your views and your values concerning your relationship with food?
So I've been gardening since I was like 8 years old. I loved putting stuff in the garden and seeing it grow. I had a grandfather who was a really good gardener, and I loved hanging out with him and learning how to grow things. And so we lived in the suburbs on Long Island, and I had what I called a farm, but it was a garden. And I, at various times in my life, I would get very intensely interested in gardening. Once again in my 20s. And I realized that the kinds of issues you deal with as a gardener are the same that farmers have to deal with. You have to deal with pests, whether they're insects or animals that want to eat your crop, and figure out what to do about that. You have to deal with fertility, keeping your soil healthy. How do you do that? And so from my interest in gardening, I very gradually transitioned into an interest in farming and learning how our food is produced. And this is, this simple question has underlied a lot of my work, which is, where does our food come from and how is it produced? And I realized that this is something everybody once knew. 100 years ago, 40% of Americans were farmers, so they knew how food was produced. And if you weren't a farmer yourself, you had someone in your family, or you had friends, or you had visited farms. But now we think food comes from the supermarket. So you actually need a detective, a food detective, to find out where it came from and how it was grown. And so answering that question has really, which took shape in the garden, is the one that really has propelled my work and my curiosity.
What are your thoughts about current food science and how processed food has changed so much since 2008?
Yeah, so food is more processed than ever. Most food processing is done for novelty, just to do something new, to combine the Wendy's Baconator with some chip or something like that, these crazy combinations, which add nothing to nutrition, or, they're just for entertainment. But in recent years, we've had a wave of food science designed to create imitation meat. And that, I think, is more interesting, potentially more useful, although it has a lot of problems too. I'm talking about things like the Impossible Burger or the Beyond Burger, plant-based burgers. They're done for idealistic reasons, to get people off of meat and shrink the meat system, which is such an environmental problem. On the other hand, they're very complex, ultra-processed foods with ingredients that haven't been in the human diet for a long time. So I'm very ambivalent about that. Is it better than eating meat? Well, it's better than eating industrial meat, but my choice would be to avoid processed foods whenever you can.
In this film, you have powerful allies in Senators Cory Booker and Jon Tester. How do you envision the political climate changing or motivating people to address our food system?
Well, yeah, this is one of the most hopeful things in the film, that Cory Booker, who's an urban legislator from New Jersey, and Jon Tester, who is an organic farmer from a very conservative state, Montana, have joined forces to try to reform the food system. And they're powerful senators in the majority. Cory Booker is on the Agriculture Committee, and he chairs a nutrition committee that's very powerful. And this is very encouraging because there's a lot that needs to change. Both of them understand that having a few big companies controlling everything is dangerous, and they're supporting efforts to rein that in and break up some of those companies. They also understand the links between a highly industrialized, concentrated food economy and our diet, which is, too much processed food and not enough whole foods.
That's just so crazy to think about how big an impact it has on us and how much our choices can determine.
Yes.
So thank you, Michael Pollan, for taking the time to speak with me today about Fooding 2, which releases in select theaters on April 9th and on digital April 12th. I'm Selene Weiss, reporting for Kids First. Please like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss my next interview or review, and those of my many other talented Kids First teammates. This interview has definitely been a food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Selene. Good luck.
You too. I had so much fun. Thank you.
Okay.